places where lumbermen work are among the most beautiful in the world. Work in the woods centers around the landing or loading place. When a certain strip of timber is to be cut, the lumbermen decide on the place from which the logs can most conveniently be shipped to the mill. A huge tree is left standing to carry the lines and the loading boom. This is called the spar tree. The donkey engines are mounted on wooden runners so that they can be hauled from one place to another. Here, 2 donkey engines operate the machinery. One swings the boom to the log pile and then hoists the logs up onto the truck. Ed Hite fastens the tongs around the log. He and his partner, Noah, are loading contractors. Hiring their own men to run the engines and bring the logs from the woods, they are paid according to the amount of timber they deliver to the mill. They think they have the best crew on the mountainside. Lumbermen have to be on guard every minute, not to fall or be hit by the heavy logs and booms. They work as a team, and their very lives depend on each man's doing his work quickly and accurately. The short, thick log used as a counterbalance is called a squirrel. The truck man signals to the driver of the donkey engine how he wants the boom run to place the log evenly on the truck. Near the landing, the timber is felled in several places at the same time. In the old days, the sawing was done by hand, but now they use modern power saws that are run by small gasoline engines. The blue smoke is the exhaust from the engine. This 8-horsepower engine and saw can be moved quickly to the next tree to be felled. There she goes. Timber! First, the tree is undercut with an axe. This determines where the tree will fall. The lumbermen plan accurately where to fell the tree. Next, the trunk is sawed on the opposite side. When the tree is partly sawed through, sometimes wedges are inserted. Strong blows send the tree over. The wedges also keep the saw from sticking. Look out! Timber! Many things determine where the tree will fall, like the wind, the foliage, and the slope of the land. The trees must fall in a clear enough place so that it will not be broken by stumps or injure other trees. The men work steadily and fast because they are paid according to the number of feet their crew fells. Lewis is foreman of the fellers and the men who saw the trees into log lengths called buckers. He is called a bull buck. Ed is a high climber. He will top the tall tree to be used for the next spar tree. He climbs carefully, cleaning off the branches. He cuts a circle around the tree where he wants the tree to break. Down it goes, bang! He swings precariously at the top. This is really risky work, because if the tree would split, it might mean death to the high climber. A good job. Bob measures off the log lengths, 32 feet and 34 feet. He oils his saw. It looks easy, but just try it. Bob has taken prizes at the lumbermen's picnics for his bucking. His tools are an axe, a saw, and a bottle of oil, which he fastens on the log. He wears a red hat in case hunters are lurking near. Lewis, the bull buck, measures the logs, length, and diameter to determine the price to be paid his men by the lumber company. He is a good boss and a good neighbor. Lewis lives next door to Ed Hite. Later, we will see his home. After the trees are felled, Ed Hite's men have the job of hauling them to the landing. They fasten the choker around the log, button it up, as they say, and signal to the landing that the log is ready. The donkey engines start the main line moving, and the log begins its long trip to the landing. The huge log crashes through the underbrush, knocking over small trees on its way up. Up the mountainside they go, felled giants of the mighty forest. Stop! They hit a snag, a huge stump. Noah cannot see the landing. He signals to a man whose duty it is to relay messages from the men in the woods to the loading platform. He closes the electric switch, which blows the whistle at the donkey engine. One whistle means stop. The man who signals has an unusual name. He is a whistle punk. Noah untangles the logs and signals to start the lines. The signal is one whistle. Several short whistles would mean fire, and all hands would stop work and fight the fire. Up, up, up the mountainside. So all day this goes on. Ed Hite signals that he is ready to receive the logs. Up they come and fall with one last leap onto the log pile. Crash! Ed unbuttons the choker. Now they are ready to be loaded onto the truck. Lunchtime. Ed jokes with the men who run the donkey engines. They are called donkey punchers. Lumbering is a very old industry, and through the years it has developed a language all its own. This afternoon, Ed will repair the lines at the top of the spar tree. He carefully fastens on the large spikes. Now, the belt. These spikes will dig firmly into the tree. All the lumbermen in the timber wear caulks in their shoes. He fastens the sling around his leg. High climbing is dangerous, and the men learn to take every precaution. Ed plans his flight. The donkey punchers run the lines carefully. Up, up, and up he goes. There are many dangers. The lines sometimes break with a terrific snap, or the tree might split. Sometimes the high climber falls, or his arm might be pulled into the block. Now he is a tiny spot at the top. Here he is checking the haul back lines, the grease plugs, and the high lead block. This big block or pulley alone weighs 1,500 pounds, so you can see the terrific load the spar tree carries. But he isn't quite through. Back up he goes, while the men below watch carefully to follow his directions. Now, here he comes down again. We understand now that it takes years of training to be a good lumberman, and high climbing requires the most skill of all. No wonder his men like to work for him. He is a good friend. Careful there. Ah, he is safely down, and the rigging is ready for work. And so, all day long, the trucks leave, with their loads piled high and securely fastened. The loads are top-heavy, and the men must drive carefully over the rough lumber roads. Men who work in the timber love the wildlife and are constantly on the watch. They might see something exciting. What's that, deer? Oh, and how graceful they are as they dash madly for the heavy timber. Soon the hunting season will be on, and the deer sense it. Some hunters and campers are a great fire hazard. Many are not like the lumbermen, trained in the ways of the wilds. Now, back at the mill. Mount Hood raises its snow-capped peak above the mountain stream where the mill stands. 6 different logging outfits work in the timber serving this mill. Altogether, there are about 50 men, and in a day they fell 100 trees. In the old days, the lumbermen lived in these remote camps, and this attracted a rough, unstable type. Now, with autos, they return to their own homes, and the typical lumberman of today is a reliable, fine man. John hammers the mill brand on the log. Each ring in the cross-section is a year in the tree's life. Just think, this tree was alive in George Washington's time. The lumber companies cooperate with the government's effort to conserve our forests. They especially fight fire and cutting the timber before it is fully grown. We understand now the terrific loss of a big forest fire. The load is ready to go. There they go, down the hill, into the water. And some more. And another pile. And so they're on the first step of their journey to the mill. On the return trip to the woods, the back extension wheels are carried on the truck proper. The trailer is uncoupled and hoisted up into the air. The logging truck backs under them, and they are lowered onto the truck. This saves gas and tires. It is cheaper to carry them than to haul them. Also, it is easier to drive up the steep mountain roads. It helps traction, and the trucks can turn in a shorter space on the narrow curves. Notice Dan's fine physique. He works in the pond, setting the chokers around the logs to hoist them onto the log pile. The men who work in the ponds have a funny name, pond monkeys. These trees are mostly Douglas or red fir, the famous tall firs of Oregon. They will be used to build homes, bridges, for construction work, and so forth. Dan fastens the choker around the log and gets back quickly out of the way. He cannot see the engine, but signals to Fred, a middleman whose sole duty is to relay messages between the man in the pond, the man on top of the log pile, and the donkey puncher who runs the engine. He signals the log is ready. The man on the log pile, called the decker, is on the alert, and the engine pulls the log to the top of the pile. This large pile contains 2.5 million board feet of lumber and is worth $60,000. When the log reaches the top, Dan signals to Fred, who relays the message to the donkey puncher. The decker now signals directions for placing the log on the pile. Down it goes to take its place with hundreds of others. The logs are kept in ponds for economy of storage space and because they are easier to move. They also season more gradually, which is better. Some logs are cut underwater. When logs are too long or too irregular to go up the chute easily, they are pulled to this saw and cut into smaller lengths in the pond. The loggers pull these logs around with apparent ease, but it requires great skill. It takes from 1 to 30 years to learn this work, and some men can never learn. The men like the work, and the pay compares well with the skilled crafts in other industries. All day long, the men feed the logs up the chute to the mill. They are held firm by the large claws. Inside the mill, they will be cut by a circular saw. Lumberjacks are proud of their skill in riding the slippery logs. Sometimes at their annual picnic, they have log rolling contests. Caulks in the shoes help steady the men on the slippery logs. On the opposite side of the mill is the lumber yard, with the huge piles of lumber left to season. The boards are not packed solidly. Space is left so that the air can circulate around them. As the lumber moves along on belts, men mark the size of the board on each piece of lumber. They are trained to judge instantly the size and kind of the board. The mark tells the men who remove the boards from the table where to place each board. Several men are needed to feed the boards into the machine. Wood is used for many things. For example, paper, rayon, turpentine, dyes, boats, charcoal, and a wide variety of building purposes. Machines called spiders pick up the bundles of lumber and dart around the yard at an almost unbelievable speed. They can turn on a dime. Well, after leaving their bundles in the proper places, they return for another load. Small pieces of board can be used, and little is left to be burned. The men pick out the pieces that may still be of some use and load them into the freight car. The lumber company operates a branch line that carries the lumber to Hood River, the nearest town. Here the cars will be switched to the main railroad lines. Sometimes the lumber mills utilize the water power from the mill streams. In the old days, this was their main source of power. On this mountainside, a wooden flume carries lumber from the sawmill high up on the mountain to a planing mill on the edge of the river. Each community ships its lumber or logs in the way that is the most economical from its particular shipping point. Here, the logs are moved to the mill in huge rafts. One raft may hold several 100,000 feet of logs. Some rafts are called cigar rafts because they're shaped like a cigar. They may go small distances or several hundred miles. They are really well built. And at the mouth of the Columbia River, they sometimes buck the tide for hours before going out in the ocean. Well, back at the mill, it is evening, and the different logging crews arrive from their respective camps. The men drive to the mill in their own cars and leave them parked there for the day. Then they all ride together to the lumber camp where they're working. Lewis and his crew arrive, the fellers, the buckers, and all the others. This is Ed Hite's old car that he keeps to drive to the mill. An old row of tumble-down houses that the lumbermen lived in the old days. Now most of them own their own homes, like this. Lewis' home, and Ed Hite's home. Ed lives 3 miles from the mill, and he's always glad to get back. His wife Ellen and Ed Jr. give him a big welcome. Hi there, buddy. What have you been doing all day? Working hard like your daddy, huh? Ed will take off his shoes before he goes into the house because the caulks in his shoes would make holes in his nice floors. While Ed goes to clean up, Ellen picks some of their own fresh corn. They expect company for dinner. Ellen has quite a reputation for her cooking. Ed feels better now. He's proud of his garden that he cleared himself right at the edge of the forest. The Hites often have company and enjoy the social life of the town Hood River. Ed belongs to the Elks Club. They never miss the monthly dances. Once a week they go to Hood River for shopping. Lewis, the bullbuck, lives next door. His wife, Marjorie, also enjoys gardening. The two couples have lots of friendly jokes. Marjorie is private secretary to the manager of the lumber mill. She works hard, and the minutes in her garden are precious ones. She and Louis go to work in separate cars because she can get home earlier and do the marketing and get the dinner before Louis comes home. When you're a gardener, your work is never finished. Hey there, what are you doing, old boy? Say, those are your mother's favorite flowers. When Ed Jr. makes up his mind to a thing, he means business. Chip off the old block. Is this the way a lumberman starts life? Pull, old boy. She's gonna tumble. Timber! Well, it looks as if Ed Jr. had what it takes to be a leader of lumbermen. Good luck, and may all your trees have happy landings.